In this video, I want to discuss with you the notion of generated connection. And what I want you to come away with is the idea that this is a writing template. All right, this is a it's not as simple as a formula, but it is an approach you can take in writing that will allow you to create something of interest if you are given a broad arena to work in, a wide scope instruction, sort of an open-ended writing assignment. Well, one thing you can do with these things is to look at the material the material you've studied with or read or considered, and try to find a connection between two entities, two things, two ideas that is not obvious or has not been made before. All right, so it is a type of comparison analysis, but you aren't trying to find all the ways in which something is similar, and you're not necessarily trying to stress their similarity. That happens, but what you are really trying to do is just establish a connection. All right. So I'm going to talk about an example here. We may or may not have read these articles, but I do have some articles that I've had certain students in certain classes read concerning Wi-Fi and the homeless. And one article, there's a company based in Texas that, based in New York, that tried to run a program in which they gave homeless people a mechanism, technology to become a hotspot, so that walkers by could still access the internet if they had Wi-Fi on their devices. And the homeless simply had to walk alongside the user, or the homeless could be stationary and the user could sit on a bench around, like, let's say, a park or something. But it was homeless people that were being used as think of poles, telephone poles or something, in that sort of sense. So there was one article that talked about that, right? Walking hotspots, or I forget the name of the article. Another article talked, this commentator, or this editor, this freelancer was writing about the demise of the USPS and how the blue mailboxes are disappearing. All right. Now, the name of his article was "Farewell My Mailbox," and so mailboxes are disappearing, and why? It's irreversible. You can't stop it. No one is sending as much mail as before, when so many other technological options are open to you. And so that was one essay, one article, and the other one was about the homeless being used as Wi-Fi hotspots. And in fact, it was being called MiFi, I believe. I'm a little sketchy on that, but those were two different articles I would have my students read and say, now make a connection. And I would get all sorts of connections, but on the surface, they both are dealing with communication. They both are using human carriers to deliver the communication. They both are essentially low cost. They both are marching along with the technology of the day. But is there? So that maybe would be how I would develop a comparison essay between the two. If I were to compare both articles and just write a comparison essay on that, I might make that list and keep on going and develop the levels of superficial comparison and depth comparison and all that. But a generated connection essay would be just to take one and really establish one connection and really establish it and describe it, develop it, explain it. So the whole purpose isn't just to compare two entities or two articles or two things, or more than two things, but rather to show, well, this one connection. All right, so it really is a focus on one connection. So I would ask you, when I ask you to write a generated connection essay, to do as the name of the template suggests, generate a connection. One, and make sure that it's one that you can really unpack, you can really establish, you can really explain, develop. It has that sort of mileage to it, a fertile connection. So I believe I asked you to read, let's say I asked you to read articles on addiction. All right, now I gave you a few of them. And if I were to give you a few of these articles, you might say, here's an article on how what it feels like to be addicted to gambling. Here's an article that talks about what it feels like to be addicted to food. Here's an article that talks about what it feels like to be addicted to shopping. All right. Here's an article that feels like what it's addicted to video gaming. Hey, you know, you can make a lot of lines of comparisons between those articles, right? So one temptation would be to slip into an easier task and just write a comparison essay. However, I threw another article in there about a man trying to sell himself, or having sold himself on an IPO, which is an initial public offering. That's when a private company decides to go public and actually have common and preferred stock traded on an exchange for, like the New York Stock Exchange or the American Exchange, NASDAQ, whatever. When that happens, then the company has to initially offer a certain amount of stock to the public. So it's an initial public offering. And this fellow, you know, sold himself through an IPO and to his shareholders. Now, he's not being traded on any actual market, but he has it set up, you know, so that it looks like you can trade stock on him and you can sell the shares and you can buy shares and that sort of thing. So how in the world is this one? Where's the connection between this one article and the 5 on addiction? So you are going to have to find a connection, and in one sense this is what you do in a comparison essay. But when you work with the idea of generating a connection, generate a connection essay, what you're trying to do is just say, hey, look, you know, these things look all different, but they're connected in one essential way. Now, they may be connected in other ways, but you've got to pick one. Pick one and really unpack it, develop it, explain it. All right. So in this sort of writing, you are going to have to include summaries, and you can't assume that your reader has read what you have read. So you will need to talk about addiction and its various assets if you're going to write this way. If I were to ask you to do the essay on addictions and this man that sells himself as an IPO, where's the connection between the two? Well, you know, you'll need to summarize the different types of addictions that are there, and then talk about this fellow. Now, you get a name with this fellow. You get a time. You get all the specifics. This is an actual historical event. You do get names with the addiction essays too, but you may decide to treat that as simply a state of being that you're describing. But you do need to summarize the article about the man, though. And then at the end, once you develop the summary and summaries and move in the explanations of the two things that you're going to connect, you know, you have to let your reader know what these things are. So that's the information part of it, where you are summarizing or describing or just, giving the description of these things. And then toward the end of this assignment, this essay, that's where you need to really say, but here's the connection. Here's what all of these things are, what they are overlapping on. Here's that point of crossover. Here's where they meet. And what is this thing? All right. Now you'll have to ask yourself questions to write this, like what's the essential nature of addiction? What's the essential nature of what this man is doing? What are some things this man is now free of? What are some things that when you are addicted you are free of? Things like that, you know. So you will have to find nodes of similarity for these things. But then when you set down to write here, pick one and really develop it as a main connector. and let's see where this goes. But this again is a different type of analysis, but its virtue is that it's training you, and it's fruitful to the audience if you actually make this work, to look at things and to think in things in terms of new categories. Saying that, you know, that looks different from something else, but they're connected in a certain way. So if we know how to treat this set of things, if we are convicted is probably the wrong word, but if we are convinced that we need to treat this set of things a certain way, if we know the right thing to do here, but because they're connected, then maybe those guiding principles apply also in this realm too. And so that once you establish the connection, we can do other things with it. But right now, we just need to legitimately establish a connection. And it has to be beyond the superficial. So obviously, don't say that they all involve, you know, one person. Well, yes, they do. But you know, go a lot deeper than what really is the one thing that all of these people are engaging in. Now, you might find 2 or 3 or 4 things that they're all engaging in, but then of those 4, pick one that you think you best can unpack and develop and then reapply later. Which one of those 4 or 3 or whatever things where they all are doing the same do you think is the best for you to write about, because it's going to open the most doors for a developed essay? That's what you need to take as your topic, as your connection, when you are generating a connection between entities.